So my name is Ammon. We come from the Bakersfield area. We have a shop, Mischievous Pets, that my wife Michelle and I co-own. I love doing it. I do it with my family. We have a storefront, and then we do these shows that we're currently at, the Reptile Expo. Honestly, what really got me into it was when I was a young boy. I would see ants, and I would see like how they would just build their mounds and how they would collect things and bring it back to the colony. And I was just fascinated by that. And that's kind of like what started all this. And then from there, I just collected everything I could. I was that weird kid who walked around with a 5-gallon bucket or those big ice cream buckets, when they're empty. And I was just always collecting things. So this right here is a California king snake. One of the things that makes them so important to the ecosystem is that they are immune to the venom of rattlesnakes and other kind of venomous snakes in the wild. And actually, snake for them is on the menu. So for these guys, like if they come across a rattlesnake in the wild, they will actually try to eat that snake. Unfortunately for the rattlesnake, they really don't have a defense against these guys because venomous snakes, they rely heavily on that venom. They bite, they release, and they wait for their prey to die. But these guys, they're constrictors. They bite, they wrap around, they constrict their prey, and they're immune to that venom that the rattlesnake relies on. So these guys are really important to help make sure that rattlesnakes don't explode in their population. If you ever come across these guys in the wild, honestly, this is their personality right here. They're not really aggressive snakes. They rather slither away from you than try to do any biting. So really cool snakes. They're definitely a lot more active than other snakes when holding them. But that to me is kind of the cool part too. In the reptile hobby, there's so many different things, and it's really hard like when people ask us like, what's our favorite? But I would say that leopard geckos are really cool, easy to take care of, fun animals. I mean, they're the kind of animal when someone comes in asking us, hey, what's a first time kind of an animal that we should get for little Johnny? Leopard geckos, they're so easy to take care of. And they have a personality to them, so they're really enjoyable. My first thing that I just really enjoy about these guys, if you look at their face, I just love that they have that permanent smile. They're always happy. You see this big fat tail that they have? So they can store months and months of food, fat right here, that if for some reason in the wild they can't find any food, that they can live off of this right here. So in the wild, these guys are feast or famine, when sometimes there's a lot of food and they'll eat whatever they can. And then other times they can't find anything. And so they'll just live off of that stored fat right there. And then other than that, one of the things that makes them really popular in this hobby is that through breeding, there's all kinds of different colors. We call them morphs, but colors and patterns. And so this may be a leopard gecko, but there are lots of different looks and patterns to leopard geckos. That is one of the things that makes them so popular. That, and I mean, you see how chill and just docile this is. I'm not really worried about this animal running away or biting me or doing anything. I feel comfortable putting this animal in kids' hands without really too much concern.
So I actually grew up afraid of spiders, and I think fear is taught. I was taught that they're scary. People like take one like, there's a spider. And so I was always scared of them. But when I learned kind of like the spiritual meaning of them, how they're like the weaver, I actually had a moment where I saw egg sac hatching, and seeing them all emerging was so cool to me. And I was fascinated and not afraid in that moment. I started watching YouTube videos and saw people have them as pets. And I learned that there's so many different kind of tarantulas. And I really believe knowledge trumps fear, not just for spiders, but in all categories of life. And I went down the rabbit hole where I'm like, I'm going to try and get a pet spider. And I did. My favorite species, I like baboon spiders the most. And my favorite is the M. balfouri, because they are like one of the only true communal species. They can actually live together. The mom will actually feed the babies. They all hatch together and they do not cannibalize. So it's an interesting behavior, and they do a lot of heavy webbing, which I like. This is the M. balfouri that I was telling you guys, the Socotra Island blue baboon. I really like the contrast of like the khaki colored and the black legs, which under a light actually reflects like a blue, like the light refracts there. This is a smaller version of the same species, both confirmed females.
I think it started when I was 11 years old, watching National Geographic. You had Steve Irwin and stuff like that. Went to a swap meet, saw my first green iguana, really saw how energetic it was, and was like, that's something I like to be around. And I train dogs too, so I always liked the challenge. So I knew the green iguana was a big challenge to get big species. So I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and try this out. This is an Aussie/Indonesian cross. So that's two different species put together. This is a frilled dragon. A lot of people know these from Jurassic Park, the dinosaurs that frill out. These guys do run on their back two hind legs when they try to escape from predators. They're mainly insectivores, so they eat a lot of crickets, worms, roaches. They love it very dry. They do like a rainfall every now and then, so we do miss them here and there. I think everybody should have one. This is a Manokwari green tree python. These guys are really cool. They live only in the trees. The most interesting thing about them to us is their tail. It's actually discolored with a black marking. They like to actually wiggle it underneath their body in the tree, and it acts like a natural worm. When the predators/preys go and try to pluck at it, they will turn around and they'll actually snatch the birds, squirrels, and stuff out of the trees. And what's actually pretty cool about them is the way their mouth is, they actually have curved fangs. They're non-venomous, so they still coil, but the muscle that they take to do all that is actually amazing, because they'll actually eat upside down, pull themselves all the way back up. As you can see how it's curled into a perfect ball in there, it's their natural sleeping position, and that's how you know your snake is comfortable.
When I was about 5 years old, my father was talking to me about getting a pet. And what we did was we looked at a bunch of different animals, and we found a bearded dragon, which I feel like is everybody's starter story. We found a bearded dragon, and I begged my dad to have this bearded dragon, and he of course said no, because I was 5 years old. Well, as it turns out, my 6th birthday was a couple weeks later, and he came home with a McDonald's bag for me, and he told me to reach my hand into the bag without looking, and I pulled out a bearded dragon. So that is what started my love of the reptiles. It has continued on since then, and I only fell in love with crested geckos about 1.5 years ago. But since falling in love with them, I've realized that there are some really cool things that I can do with this species to sort of help promote the species and help promote reptile safety. This is a Urodactyloides. Specifically, it is the Uri-O variety. And this baby is almost full grown. This is the smallest of the New Caledonian species. It lives on the same islands as the crested geckos, as the Chihuahua geckos, and as the Leachianis geckos. But it stays only about this size. Maybe it'll get another inch bigger. These are starting to get really popular in the hobby, but they're not there yet because there's not enough supply yet. So I've started breeding these guys along with their siblings, other Euro species or Urodactyloides species like the Agricoli, and the Uri-Vs and the Uri-Os and the Uri-S's. They're absolutely spectacular. I highly recommend them. They are a small gecko, but they're handleable, and that is really what I think people want. What happens is you fall sort of into this hobby when you find a reptile that you love. And you realize that you can do great things for the hobby, you can really help educate people, and you can create beautiful animals. So that's what I did.
A lot of the people who come here to the reptile expos, we can have conversations about the animals that they have and what it is that they're doing, and we can share information because this is a growing hobby. Keeping reptiles, 20 years ago was kind of like a weird thing that people, like did in their basement or their closet, and now it's grown into such a community, kind of a hobby where we can share ideas. And I just like to give it an example, dart frogs, for example. There's more dart frogs in this hobby than there is in the wild. And that's not because we've taken them all out of the wild. It's just because we've gotten so good at breeding them and expanding their lifespan. And in the wild, most of their natural habitat has been destroyed. And so there's just so fewer of them in the wild than there is in the hobby. And so it's things like that's really cool about this.
One, I love devoting my time to the animals and learning about their habits and learning about what works for them and constantly growing in that. But you meet so many amazing people when you do this. We really turn out into a family. I mean, all of us show up at the same expos. We can hit each other up with questions, comments, concerns, anything that we need, we show up. So there's a lot of really beautiful people in this hobby, and it's just a really nice place to connect and share passion about animals.